airline partnerships, air service development, and commercial growth. With extensive experience in aviation, airport commercial strategy, route development, and stakeholder management, she plays a key role in shaping the growth and connectivity vision of India's upcoming international airport. Please put your hands together and welcome Ms. Surabhi Rana on stage.
Surabhi herself every year.
So good to be over here. It's my 4th year being associated with the Airport Modernization Summit, and every year there are some new insights that I get to hear and also share my views with the fellow audience. So today what I'm going to talk about is the resilient air networks. Nothing technical, it's all about how an airport can grow, how aviation can grow, how a region can grow. But there would be a larger contribution of various other fields that will help in building this resilient air network in terms of the growth of the overall region. So this is our domestic air network. As you can see that we are connected to majorly all the destinations in India. Right from all the major metros to the tier 2, tier 3 cities to the regional remote routes, etc. So this map that you see is almost 10 years old, of around 2016. And now if we see the current network, just see how dense it has become. This is how the air connectivity across India on the domestic routes looks like. Now what has changed, like I mentioned, the overall connectivity has densified. We all know that India is one of the fastest growing aviation markets, especially in terms of the domestic. Now with this type of a network, the overall impetus of the growth of the respective airports, the challenges for the respective airports has also increased. The airports have to basically put in more resources to ensure that they are able to handle this type of growth. Just to give you a reference point, between 2006 and 2026, in 10 years, we have seen a 40% increase in the frequencies, and you can see just by looking at how cluttered this map looks like compared to the previous map. The frequencies have increased by 60%. So that shows that there is an equal amount of pressure on the other ecosystem to ensure that we are able to handle this growth. And that's where the airport ecosystems, they need to go through these changes. In the past, we have seen that the airports have endured various type of changes, whether it's to do with the macroeconomic events, whether it's to do with the growth propensity, etc., etc. But effectively, the airports, the overall aviation ecosystem has gone through various changes, and that's what we are talking about today. That why this resilient air network is needed. Also to answer the question that what makes an air network resilient, and then how it can be made resilient. Having said that, we all know that aviation has entered the age of continuous disruption. In the last few months, of course, you would have gone through various major reports, you would have experienced on your own that there have been multiple pressures on the growth of aviation. And it's not just in the last few months, in the last so many years, we have witnessed this. We have seen the growth of aviation in India in the last 20 years, since the time of the Air Sahara times, the Air Deccan times, and since then we haven't looked back. But it hasn't been a smooth ride for the entire aviation ecosystem. I'm sure you would be able to recognize most of these events that have happened in the past, whether we talk about COVID or the collapse of the industries or the various network issues on the part of the airlines or the airports that have led to, at the end of the day, improper passenger experience. But we have sailed through all those events. Just showing you some more data right now. What you see over here are two pie charts. These are for the period of June 2026 and June 2025. If you compare these pie charts, what you see is that effectively the overall capacity has reduced year on year. If we talk about how the capacity between the full service carriers and the low cost carriers have transitioned in the last 1 year, that has also seen an impact. And we all know because of the Gulf crisis, because of the war, this is the situation that we are witnessing. So the point that I'm trying to make right now is that it is still not a stable environment for the aviation and the larger ecosystem. And of course, some more graphs for you, all showing the negative sentiments. Whether we talk about the aircraft backlogs, the business confidence, the fuel prices, we all know about them, the overall travel uncertainty, the travel sentiments, all showing a downward trend. It's a pretty bad story, right? But still, the aviation continues to grow. We saw how everything went to a standstill when COVID hit. But I'll show you some numbers right now. Just see this graph. This graph is by Airports Council International. For the larger audience to know, it is a body that represents the global airports. If you see the bottom line chart of 2019, which is the pre-COVID, and then 2025 post-COVID, there is a growth in the overall passenger traffic. In 2026, where the market scenarios are still not good, still we are seeing a growth, which means despite so many challenges, despite the uncertainty, there is a growth that is happening. And that is what we are just trying to talk about through this graph, that it is not the stability but the resilience in the overall ecosystem of the aviation that is helping in the overall growth of this market. And one of the important things that is driving in this, coming from the airports, is that there is a changing airport mindset. When I talk about the changing airport mindset, airports are no longer just the transport infrastructure, not just the processors, where their job is just to build an airport, build an infrastructure, and let passengers go through it. Let airlines operate from there, let the wider concessionaires and the stakeholders operate from that infrastructure. But now, airport operators are more and more invested in the day-to-day business. They are becoming more of an economic infrastructure providers, which means they are understanding their contribution in the overall economic acceleration of the region. And it is not just about creating an infrastructure. And that brings to the second point, that what makes a resilient air network? What type of air connectivity can be provided from a region so that it stays over there? It helps in generating the economic acceleration. And some of the key points that actually target that are how strong the overall route development market is there, what type of intelligence flows between the airport, the airlines, the wider stakeholders that will help in developing that air network. That is one of the critical aspects. And just to throw some more light on this air service development, actually airports no more just focus on that let an airline come in and operate from this airport. Let them connect whatever routes they want to connect. No. Now they are more invested. Now they talk more openly with the airlines to give them the feedback that look, there is a possible potential to operate a non-stop flight, say for example, from Noida airport to the markets like of Mumbai, Bangalore, Hyderabad. Please, airline, please come and operate from these routes. There is a potential to operate non-stop flights to Southeast Asia, to Middle East, to Africa. What can be done so that we can have these routes in place? So that's the type of investment the airports are bringing on the table to ensure that it becomes commercially viable for the airlines and also for all the other stakeholders to operate. And to support that commercial decision, one of the important things is operationally how those flights are doing. Now when I talk about the operations, it also includes that airlines, what they are actually operating the flights, how comfortable they are finding to manage the day-to-day routine operations. Are they finding it hassle? If yes, they are going to give the feedback to their commercial team that we are not going to operate from this airport. It's not becoming much of a business sense. So those are some of the things that operationally actually plays a critical role in ensuring that commercially it becomes viable. Another important pillar for this resilient air network is the economic side of the business, which means that financially, whatever the connectivity is coming in, it becomes important for the larger ecosystem, which includes beyond the airline and beyond the airport operator, which means the concessionaire, which means the passengers, which means the other stakeholders who are operating from that particular airport. And one of the critical aspects in this is what type of digital and data-driven decisions can be taken. So when I talk about digital aspect over here, and I merged it with data, what I mean is that, while I can go from each person to each person asking about, okay, where do you want to fly? What type of opportunities you can bring in, or what type of cargo I can get from this market. But when I back it up with some digitization, it means that there is a much wider proposition to figure out, what is the end source of this data, how I can further use this data in my decision making. And last but not the least, collaboration is critical to ensure that we are able to build that profitable, high-yield air network. And like I mentioned throughout, with collaboration, I mean with each and every stakeholder. It also means with the end user, which is the passenger, or the end customer from the cargo perspective, our freight forwarders and the shippers as well. And like I mentioned, it is not the airport which is actually helping in the overall regional acceleration, but it is the other way around. Because a market exists, that's where an airport exists. And that is one of the fundamental clarity which needs to be brought in when an airport operator actually operates from an airport. It is because of, already there is a market there, because of which an airport will get benefited. Like for example, with Noida Aero, that's the perfect classic case. We already have Delhi Airport, which is at a capacity of 120 million. Then why there was a need of another airport? Because there was a larger catchment that was to be served. There was a larger catchment both from the passengers and freight perspective, which was to be catered to. And that's where the entire, thought process of coming up with a new airport kicked in. And just brings a more light on the air service development. Actually, there is a transition that has been witnessed. And of course, I'm not very much on this because I did mention about it, that there was an old concept of how air service development works. But now there's a modern approach to it, where it's more of collaboration, more of data-backed information, more of understanding the need of the customers that is leading to the air service development at airports in India and abroad. In India primarily because we are still a fairly new aviation market compared to the markets in Europe and USA. At the end of the day, what we are looking for is the value proposition. Now that is the critical thing in the overall air service development, and that leads to the resilient air network. If we are able to cater to the value, if offer value to the customers, to our partners, that's where air service development actually becomes the critical factor. Just to throw some light, I've taken two studies. Of course, this is quite a dated data, but just to give you some perspective. What you see over here is the route from Elborg to Amsterdam. That's one of the airports in Denmark, Elborg. So what I'm trying to show is why we say that yes, there is a regional growth which is there, which leads to overall air service development, which leads to the airport catering to the needs. It's the other way around also which is correct, which means when a new route starts, it actually helps in market stimulation. And because of this market stimulation, at the end of the day, the customers get benefited. So when I'm showing this Elborg Amsterdam route, what I'm trying to show is before the route started, you can see that there was very less number of passengers who were traveling on that route. As soon as the direct flights started between this route, we saw a major increase, almost 4 times the passengers who were traveling before. The similar case, if you see, on Berlin region, there were certain number of passengers which were traveling before, which are represented through this orange, high chart. But as soon as the non-stop flight came in, we saw almost a 2x increase in the overall demand in this region. And like I focused before, data is the key. And data, not the traditional data that we go through, various tools and figure out what is, the point of sale, how, the passengers are traveling from one airport to another, but more deep dive into the data. It includes, various macroeconomic factors that will help in influencing the passenger flow. Going in depth and looking into the respective markets to figure out, what is the overall behavior of the passenger while it is making its travel decision. And of course, some more knowledge on, finally, what are those 10 principles to make this resilient air network. Most important is collaboration, followed by creating that ecosystem where each and every stakeholder can grow. How we can diversify the overall partnerships, not only limited to airlines, but with multiple other concessionaires. How we can support the requirement or the needs of the end user. For example, the efficient service transport, the facilities that need to be provided at the airport, etc. So these are some of the factors that actually play a critical role in basically shaping that air network that can sustain for a long period. And it makes more sense for a greenfield airport. And greenfield airports actually have that opportunity to basically make a difference compared to the already established airports. And how they can do it? Through the design philosophy. When they're developing something new, they can integrate various concepts which are more, I would say, recent, which can actually help in the operational efficiencies or the customer experience. What type of commercial revenue streams can be developed to ensure that as an airport operator or as the aviation market, it could be more resilient, it could be more profitable in the long term. And then, in terms of the operational resilience, to bring in more value-added services all around to improve and enhance the efficiencies. ensuring how we can build in synergies between the different modes of transports, and that's what is the fourth resilience, which is a multimodal resilience, whether it's the rail, road, or any other mode of transport. And of course, the point that I mentioned throughout, the stakeholder resilience, to ensure that the stakeholders stick with us, in our journey. And that's what we are trying to do with Noida Airport. Just to let you know, we started our operations effective 15th of June. We started with domestic operations. Soon we'll be starting with international operations as well. But what we are trying to do is cater to this primary catchment that before 15th of June had to travel for almost 3 to 4 hours to take a flight. We are providing an alternate choice to the traveling community. Not only this, from the cargo perspective, there is a lot of potential for the cargo that sits on the western Uttar Pradesh belt that we are able to cater. And how we are doing this, again, like I mentioned, by closely working with our partners, whether it's the airlines, our stakeholders, the freight forwarders, shippers, etc. How closely we can work with them to ensure that they are able to operate comfortably through this airport. And here is a short video. So it's a journey for us. I don't say that it will all be correct when we are started, but yes, like I mentioned, it's a journey where we need the handholding of all our partners to ensure that we are able to develop a resilient network. And just last few words, that airports not just connect the destinations, they connect the larger economies. And that is what is going to define the next era of growth in aviation. Thank you so much for patiently hearing me out. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, Ms. Surabhi. That was felicitating Ms. Surabhi Rana with a memento as a token of appreciation on behalf of Tricon Events. Now, ladies and gentlemen, a very special